Well, welcome back. Today we're talking all about weed walleyes, and it's no surprise that walleyes love to hang out in the weeds, especially as it gets into the summertime, but that doesn't mean that every set of weeds is going to have walleyes. So today we're going to talk through some of the things that I look for when I'm targeting walleyes in the weeds, the types of weeds to look for, the type of areas to look for, and maybe some things to avoid as well. So we got a big shallow flat over to our side. We're going to start driving with the electronics, seeing if we can identify some of these areas that are going to be prone to holding walleyes. I'm kind of on the break line. I'm going to use my live scope, kind of point my live scope front and to the side, but also use my side imaging. You can see maybe a fish there. I'll screenshot that. You can see some good low-lying weeds. We're kind of in that 10 to 15 foot range or so. And basically what you're looking for is scattered weeds. I don't want these super thick, crazy weeds, but I'm going to mark kind of what you're looking for, sometimes on your side imaging off to the left-hand side there. Some of these weed patches, some of these more scattered weeds. There you're seeing some fish out a little bit deeper. So this is kind of interesting actually, seeing some of these thicker scattered weed patches. And you can almost see, I'll mark that, you can almost see some fish on the edges of those thicker ones. If you get some of those thicker patches, you will see that sometimes, especially off the edges, just kind of cruising. I'm just gonna kind of turn around here, start working through some of these areas that we were seeing some of these fish. There's quite a few fish along this whole stretch, and we're just kind of work through that and see if we can't catch a few. They look a little shallower. Some of them I slip bobbered down a little bit. Definitely could have moved it even further up. Or further down, I should say. I'm in the mix of those fish, but they are above it, which is not what I want. Usually I want those fish to be below it so they can move up. Move it a little bit, pop it. There, the bobber's down, starting to move it. Reel down, feel weight, set the hook. They are not far from us here. And we have an eater size walleye. Not a giant by any means, but man, those fish were close. Woo! That's a lot of times what we're gonna find as you get to these weed edges or mix in these weeds. You're gonna see these fish, whoa, be in that good eater variety. Right here, we're in 8 to 10 feet. I'll show that guy off. Woo, show that guy off. And we're actually gonna keep a couple today because I want to get a meal. We had a big fish fry, so we're looking to regroup a little bit. So you can actually still see those fish very close. And one of the things you'll notice as I'll pan around here, you can see weeds, thicker weeds, and then as you get over here, there's a little open patch. So you can see some open patch, and that is where these fish are hanging out, and you'll see that a lot. Anytime there's some of these open patches mixed into these weeds, that's where the walleyes like to hang out, sometimes in the middle to be able to ambush some of their prey. But a good example right there of finding some of these patches in the weeds. You don't always want the thickest of the thick. We saw some of those patches, and they will hang out on the edges of those, but you can see here, this is more, I'll have to pull it out, but maybe more of like a cabbagey type weed instead of maybe something really thick. But also I like to find some of these with the side imaging, find some of these bigger areas when I see scattered patches, or maybe I see openings in the weeds. Just when I find that, especially when I find an area that's holding multiple groups like that, then I will go back with the live scope and I will kind of break it down in a little more detail, kind of like I'm doing right here. So we're gonna keep moving along this edge, try to find some of these fish kind of mixed in these weeds. See a bunch still over there. I think I'm a little deep, definitely a little deep, but that one popped it. Ooh, and he spit it again. There he is. Reel down, set the hook. These ones are another little open type patch. You can see quite a few more up there. Another good little eater. I'll probably net this guy so that way we make sure we get a meal. You can still see some more up there. Nice little open patch in the weeds. This one is definitely even more sparse. It's kind of like almost a transition. These guys sure are feisty in open water like this. So throw that guy in here. It's kind of what this little area is kind of like a little point off this flat. So there's a big flat with lots of weeds on it. And there's these little bit of open patches. This one's actually juts out just a little bit, and you can see where it transitions from those weeds to that almost like a harder bottom. And that's kind of where these fish are hanging out. I'll kind of show you a side imaging shot of it here. I'll pan around so you can kind of see we're in about 12 feet of water. you see weeds kind of all around. We're kind of on the edge of this break. You can see weeds scattered all around. These ones are pretty low lying. And then when you get up top, you see it's a little more open. And that's where these fish are hanging out. And again, in kind of that open patch in the weeds. Pan around here, you can see a few more. Ooh, there's some suspended fish, some more weeds, some more bait. All right, before we move on to the next spot, I'm gonna show you a little bit of some of the vegetation. Again, this is going to be very sparse. You can see it's kind of just intermixed in some of this stuff. And so I kind of want to show you what we're looking at. You can see it on the side image, you can see it on the live scope, but I want you to see what we're actually working with, because oftentimes I think I'm in the right kind of weeds and I'll drop the aqua view down and it is not necessarily accurate. So I like to have this as my aqua view 822 HD camera I have with all the time in the boat, on the ice, but just really helps to kind of work with your live scope, work with your side imaging to kind of identify either fish or weeds, see some coontail, maybe the start of some cabbage, and then some of this grassy type stuff. Typically what I look for, I'm looking for a little bit more of that broadleaf stuff, a little more shade. Again, you can see that coontail down there. You can see some cabbage down there, some little thicker patches, and then some of that low-lying grass underneath, and there is a couple big largies. So you can see a lot of fish life down there in general. A lot of times what I'm looking for is more of that broadleaf stuff or coontail. Those, like a cabbage or a coontail, tend to be my favorites. If you don't have a camera, I would make the investment into one, because it can really just pinpoint you on some of the exact spots where, you know, you might be seeing some weeds, but it might not quite be the right type of stuff. It might be really grassy, really thick. Some of that kind of stuff I don't tend to find fish in very often unless they're sitting over top of it. Where this, they're definitely kind of milling around the edges, open in those open spots. I'll pop the camera down probably in a couple other areas too, just to see some of the different types of stuff that we're fishing. All right, so here's a classic example of what you might see in the weeds. See all that right there? That is a whole slew of little bass. We'll see if I can get out in time to kind of prove the point. Geez, they are thick. These are probably a bunch of little bass, and they are right next to us here. Drop that down. Ooh, they're a little deeper actually. This guy's coming up though, popped it. Anyways, like I said, when you see a huge slew of fish like that and they're moving around very quickly, you're gonna see that a lot in the weeds. They are a bunch of little bass, most likely. So I'm kind of driving here. I actually have a little bump out in front. One fish there. You can see that one's a little bit up above. It's round. It's actually moving just a little bit. All the other ones are tall and kind of narrow. So it's kind of important to differentiate between the weeds, between, there you can see a group of fish. I'm gonna kind of get around these guys. Important to differentiate between the weeds and the fish. The fish are definitely obviously your circles, and they're gonna be up above a little bit more. And as you can see, it's kind of a transition. There's weeds, 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 off to kind of like a hard bottom spot again. So I'm going to spot lock us here. You can see where it transitions. They're definitely right on that transition. Toss that guy out. See if we have anything interested. There's one going up. Ooh, another one going up. And we're looking. There, one pops it, slow going down. Hopefully that means it's a walleye. Reel down, lift up. Let's see what we got. Staying down like a walleye. It is a walleye. Whoa. It is a feisty walleye. You can see right on that transition again. Oh, there we go, another perfect little eater. Throw that one in the box. Don't keep fish super often, but we just had a big fish fry with our small group from church, and so we time to restock. So like I said, definitely a little different spot. Not actually what I anticipated coming out here. I had been on a decent weed pattern where they were actually in the weeds, and you can see today they are more on the edges of these. You can see weeds, weeds, weeds all the way around, and once it hits to about there, you can see it kind of transition to this hard bottom. And when you're seeing it on a map, it's honestly kind of nondescript for the most part. It's this big shallow flat from 10 to 15 feet. And there's just this little contour change where it's kind of a little U. So again, like I said, kind of a sneaky little spot, kind of nondescript. You'd think this whole thing was weeds, but there's this tiny little contour change, tiny little circle on this, and that is where these fish were hanging out. And so you can see here, instead of actually being hard bottom like I anticipated, there's actually a little bit of low-lying grass. That's why slip bobbers, drop shots, some of these presentations might be a little more effective. There, he popped it down on this deeper weed edge. Reel down, set the hook down on this deeper weed edge. See what we got. Have the right color. Another eater. So we moved spots a little bit here, and we were actually working a little bit deeper weed edge. There we go, right around 15-incher, nice little eater. So these are definitely more of those thicker weeds. Remember I was talking earlier about the weeds that are a little bit thicker. You're gonna need to find fish on the edges of them, and that's this one right here. You can see there's a bunch of bait cruising on top, so you're either gonna see these fish on these weed edges up on top of this thicker weeds, or off the edge, kind of working the edges of these. Let's throw the side aiming shot over here. Definitely a little thicker. You can see the hard bottom edge to it, and a few fish hanging off the edge. I'm gonna show you what we're talking about. You can see as I drop down into a lot of that, you can just see how thick that is. Be very tough to work too many baits through. I'm gonna bump out just a touch. That way we can see this edge a little better. You can see sandy, rock bass came and looked. And maybe even a rock down there. Another sucker maybe. That's what's so nice about this camera too, is you can just reel it up quickly and easily, drop it back down, much easier than having to wind up a cord. So another style of weeds, another type of weeds to look for that you might catch some fish. Like I said, we caught that first walleye right on the edge of it. Just another option if you're wanting to learn more about weed walleyes. Oop, there's something right on the bottom there. Come back up for it. It's a better fish. Pop it. Yes, he did. Good, that's a better fish too. He's swimming with it. Good, reel down, lift up. Oh, I guess it's not that big. Oh my gosh, it looked way bigger. Another eater though. You can see this one is on a little deeper weed edge. Whoa, there we go. Another eater. I did want to give a couple shout outs before we go to a couple subscribers that are just always commenting, always supporting. So big shout out to Craig Wavra, I think that's how you pronounce it, and Justin Mooney. I know there's more. I'm going to be giving more shout outs later, but I just felt it fitting to give a shout out. These guys are supporting on, commenting on pretty much every video. They don't gain anything from it, but just want to give them a shout out. Thanks so much for the support. Honestly, that's the kind of stuff that keeps me going. So thank you so much for all of that. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you for watching the whole video, because that is also super helpful. But either way, I'm going to be heading up actually to a little backcountry fishing trip, hoping to film some of that. So stay tuned for some of that footage. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Well, turn the cameras off because it started raining, and 27-incher. So there are some big ones in the weeds as well.